From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Washington Watch. Coming up on this Good Friday edition, Christians around the world are preparing to celebrate the most significant day in the Christian faith this Sunday, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to talk about that and much more. Our guests today include Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. He'll be talking about how clergy are now being listed among those providing essential services in emergency situations. Jeremy Dice, Special Counsel for First Liberty, is here with the latest on a few rogue mayors restricting churches from having drive-in services at their churches. And Senior Pastor Carter Conlon of Times Square Church in New York is here about how the lights may be out this Sunday in church buildings, but the light of the gospel, based upon what we've been seeing in this crisis, is going to reach a whole lot more people. That and a lot more to come on Washington Watch, but I want to go straight to my first guest, a former radio talk show host, a member of Congress, and now the 48th Vice President of the United States, Vice President Mike Pence. Vice President, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Tony Perkins, it is good to be with you on Washington Watch, and thank you so much for all you've done as our nation contended from the very beginning with the coronavirus. We've appreciated your voice and are grateful for your support and prayers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President. And I know I will hear from my listeners if I don't do this first. I want you to know that every time I talk to someone, they ask me, please tell the President and the Vice President we support them and we are praying for them. I hear that every time I go out, every time I'm talking to some of our supporters. And so know that you and the President are being prayed for daily by many people all across this nation.
Tony, we know it, and I want to tell all of your listeners across the country that we feel those prayers every day, and we couldn't be more grateful. And the progress that we are making, I know it is a tribute to God's grace and a tribute to the incredible compassion and cooperation of the American people. I mean, we have asked the American people first with 15 days and now with 30 days to slow the spread, to make real sacrifices, to put the health and well-being of their neighbors first, and tens of millions of Americans are doing that. And despite the heartbreaking losses of this week, particularly in the New York and New Jersey areas, we've seen now more than 17,000 Americans lose their life to the coronavirus. I want to tell your viewers to be encouraged, because we're also seeing in the midst of those heartbreaking numbers, we are seeing rays of real progress. And we're seeing hospitalizations declining consistently in New York. We're seeing evidence that cases are leveling off in the greater New York City area, in Louisiana, and in Detroit. And again, it is a tribute. It is a tribute to God's grace, but it's a tribute to the great compassion and cooperation of the American people in heeding the President's coronavirus guidelines for America.
Well, Mr. Vice President, I was watching the press conference just a little bit ago where the President was up. You were there with the President. And, now the projections are that we're going to see less than 100,000 fatalities as a result of the virus. That's significantly lower than some projections. Is this the result of as you said, people heeding the guidance of the CDC and quite frankly, the prayers that have been lifted up?
Every expert on the White House coronavirus task force, who are the leading experts on infectious disease in the world, Tony, look at those improved projections and believe that all the credit goes to the American people, to the fact that they went to coronavirus.gov, or they reviewed the 30 days to slow the spread, where we ask people, if you're sick, stay home. If someone in your household is tested positive, keep the entire household at home. the people that are working from home, schooling from home, and avoiding social gatherings of more than 10, using the drive-through at restaurants. People are doing these things, and so where the initial projections were grave and heartbreaking, and the losses we've endured are still heartbreaking and will continue to be, the progress that we're beginning to see is, we really believe, is evidence that the American people understand that their future is in their hands. Mm-hmm. And what's most moving to me is that most Americans know that for healthy people of every age, the risk of the coronavirus for serious illness is still relatively low. Many people will only have flu-like symptoms, and many will have no symptoms at all. But what I think the American people have apprehended from early on is that for seniors with serious underlying health conditions, or for anyone with a serious underlying condition or an immunodeficiency, the risk of a serious outcome or worse is very real. And so when you see people doing these things, Tony, it really is the American people demonstrating their heart and their compassion for their neighbor, because they are recognizing that the risk here that none of us would want to take is to inadvertently spread the coronavirus to someone for whom the outcome could be quite grave. And that's what's most inspiring here. But I want to tell you, we have to look at the numbers, because that's the nature of guiding national policy. But I want your viewers, or your listeners, to know that we know this is one life at a time. This is one family at a time. And that we mourn with those who mourn, we grieve with those who grieve, but we do not grieve like those who have no hope. What we celebrate this Sunday gives us hope, and also the progress and compassion of the American people gives us hope as well.
It certainly does. And to speak to that issue very quickly, I know you have to go here in just a moment, Mr. Vice President, but churches have worked, I think, very well with the administration by and large. There's been a few. In fact, I've even met with some trying to encourage them to comply with the CDC guidelines and the guidance that have been put out. But we're now seeing in this time some that are, I would say, overly zealous. We've seen mayors in Louisville, Kentucky, Greenville, Mississippi, and even some in your home state of Indiana, who have gone beyond what I think is reasonable in restricting religious liberty. And I know that this administration is very, very sensitive to that first freedom.
Tony, and let me thank you for the work that you've done on the International Religious Freedom Commission. You know that in this president, we have a president and an administration that cherishes the freedom of religion of every American. But when we issued the guidelines from the White House task force asking people to avoid social gatherings of groups of more than 10, it really was about putting the health of the American people first. And we continue to encourage people, particularly in communities of faith, churches, synagogues, other places of worship, to heed the guidelines for these 30 days. We know it's challenging. In fact, today I made the point at the press conference to remind people that the role that churches and their ministries are playing during this coronavirus epidemic has been incredible. The generosity, the compassion, the ministries are impacting lives every day. And we reminded people that even if you're not in the pew, if you're able to do so, that you should still contribute to these ministries, because they're playing such a vital role in helping our communities through this time. But we do just strongly encourage everyone in the sound of my voice to heed the guidelines during this set period of time, because we believe it is the most effective way to continue to build on the progress that we've seen. And this weekend, the president announced that he'll be watching an online service at the White House. And Karen and I, for the third week in a row, will be gathered in the family room at the vice president's residence, and we'll be taking in Pastor Mark Vrogop at our home church, College Park, in the Indianapolis area. And And then we'll be doing a little Skyping with our kids around the country for Easter brunch, and we know that it's a sacrifice for families. But as I tried to gently remind fellow believers today, the Lord said, "Where two or more are gathered, there He is also." So we can still celebrate that He is risen this Sunday. We can be a blessing to one another and do our part to slow the spread and hasten the day that we put the coronavirus behind us.
Well, hopefully hopefully that's very soon. And Mr. Vice President, I do appreciate you joining us today. And I would encourage you. I know the Justice Department is on this, but as evidence emerges that there may have been some that went too far in singling out religious institutions, that's something that's addressed in the days ahead. Because while we're all in this together, these fundamental freedoms must be defended and protected here at home, because it does have implications for what we do abroad as well.
Well, just rest assured that we will, as you have done so well throughout your career, Tony, with this president, this vice president, this administration, will always stand for our first freedom, the freedom of religion. And I thank you for your work, and God bless you, and happy Easter to you and all your listeners around America.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, to you and to Karen as well. May you all have a blessed weekend. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.